So, Hare Krishna. So we're going to read from Srimad Bhagavatam. Which verse number is it?
Chapter 9, verses
Please.
22. We're concluding chapter 9, 22 to 23, but has no purport. Starting 10,
Okay.
1 to 3.
All right.
They didn't conclude.
Anyway, I understand.
Very good.
Thank you. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Krishna, well, that's 10:3 there.
That's 10, 2. Chapter 10, first text has no purport.
Okay, I just need to know what verse that is.
Okay, it's 2 to 3.
Okay,
10.
that's all I need to know. Thank you. So, the first verse we're reading is Krishna's to Griha Kriteshu Yagrayana Madhavitra Drakshi Arjuna Purvam Guyika Dhanadamaja. While Mother Yashoda was very busy with household affairs, the Supreme Lord Krishna observed twin trees known as Jamala Arjuna, which in a former millennium had been demigod, sons of Kubera. Puranarada Shapena Vrikshatam Prapita Unadam Nalakubara Maniviva Itikata Sriyambita. In their former birth, these two sons, known as Nalakubara and Manigriva, were extremely opulent and fortunate, but because of pride and false prestige, they did not care about anyone. And thus Narada Muni cursed them to become trees. So, thus in Bhaktivinoda purports the 10th canto, 9th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Mother Yashoda, Volumes of Krishna. In chapter 10, Sri Raja Vacha, Katyatam Bhagavan Ita, Triyokshapasya Karma, Yatat Vigaritam Karma, Jainava Devarshes Dhamma. King Parichi inquired from H.D.Goswami of great and powerful sin, what was the cause of Nalakubara's and Manigriva's being cursed by Narada Muni? What did they do that was so abominable that even Narada, the great sage, became angry at them? Kindly describe this to me. Now, we'll do text 2 and 3. Text 2 is written on the board. Sri Sukuvacha Rudasya Anuchara Utva Sudrittau Anadamaja Ailashopadane Ramye Mandakinyam Nadokato. So, I'll explain what that means, and then you chanted some idea of what you're chanting. so you know, Rudrasya Anuchara Bhutva, Bhutva becoming, Anuchara followers, Rudrasya, Rudra. So these are sons of Kubera who became direct assistants of Rudra. And as we often experience in this world, when someone is a close servant of an important person, that servant often also considers himself to be very important. Not always the case, but it's common enough. So Sujata, and that was the case here. Sujata, they were very proud, very conceited. Sujata, Dhanadaatmaja, the Atmaja, the two sons of Dhanada, Kubera. Another name of Kubera is Dhanada, the wealth giver, literally, because he's a treasurer, so he hands out the payments. So he's called Dhanada, so these two sons of Dhanada, these two sons of Kubera. And Kailashopravane, Ramye, in the Ram is the word meaning pleasure, so Ramya means very pleasurable, very enjoyable. And Upavana in a little forest. Vana, of course, is forest, and Upavana means a smaller forest, not a big forest. Sort of a pleasure grove, large garden. So in Upavana of Kailasa, the place where Lord Shiva lives, Kailasa Upavane Ramye is very enjoyable. Mandakinyam, by the Mandakini River, or on the river Mandakini. Madhukata, they were terribly proud and mad. Also Madhukata, they were drunk. Sort of crazy, So, that's what we have so far. Obviously, this is now starting out very well for the sons of Kubera. So, we'll chant this verse a few times and then go on to the next verse. So, Sri Sukuvacha, Rudrasyanucha, Bhutva, Sujipta, Dhanadaatmaja, Kailasopavane Ramye, Mandakinyam Madhukata. So, the gentleman want to try that?
Sri Sukuvacha,
Sri Sukuvacha, Rudrasyanuchara Bhutva, Sujipta Dhanadaatmaja, Kailasopavane Ramye, Mandakinyam Madhukata. Rudrasyanuchara Bhutva, Dhanadaatmaja, Kailasopavane Ramye, Mandakinyam. So any ladies? Sri Sukuvacha, Rudrasyanuchara Bhutva, Sujipta Dhanadaatmaja, Mandakinyam Madhukata. Sri Sukuvacha, Rudrasyanuchara Bhutva, Sujipta Dhanadaatmaja, Kailasopavane Ramye, Varuni Madiram Pitwa, which means Pitwa, having drunk, basically liquor called Varuni. It's like there's vodka and whiskey and everything. This is Varuni. Varuni Madiram, this intoxicating beverage called Varuni. Madiram means something that just sort of makes you mad. So intoxicating is a good word. This intoxicant, this Varuni intoxicant, having drunk it, Pitwa, Madame Gurni Lochana, they became so drunk their eyes were rolling around. Lochana means their eyes. Oh, by the way, all these words in the AU, which is the dual form. Sanskrit, there's singular, plural, but also dual form. And so we're talking about the Atmaja. Atmaja means born of oneself. Atmaja. And it means son. And Atmaja means two sons. In the song, the six Goswamis, a lot of words end in AU, like Vande Rupa Sanatana, Where Do You Go? Because the author, it's a really beautiful composition, divides the six Goswamis into two pairs, having three pairs. Rupa Sanatana, Raghu, Yugo. Yuga means the twin, or the pair of Raghus. And Gopala, Siji and Gopala go. So, and little Gopal, so Gopala goes from little Gopal. So, it's very interesting. So by dividing the six Goswamis into three pairs, the author can use this AU form throughout, which is not as common as a singular plural, therefore it's kind of a striking composition. So here we have the same dual form, AU, and that's why it's Anucharo, and Sutripto, and Atmajo, and so on. Madhukata was all dual form, talking about the two. Nalakuvara, I agree. Not Nalakuvara, as you sometimes hear. It's Nalakuvara, I agree. So, Madad Agurnita means just rolling around and loaching out their eyes. Their eyes are just rolling around because they're drunk. And Sri Janayar, Nugaya these. And they were being, it's translated here, vibrating songs sung by them. Gayatri means by women who are singing. So Sri Janayar, women folk, in other words, girls. They were with women who were kind of, anu means along, singing along with them. Anu means along, following. And Gayatri means by women who were singing. So these girls were singing along with them, like they would sing something in this drunken state, and the women were singing along with them. They were all joking. And so Chaitanya, they moved along Pushpite Vane in a flowering forest. So this is a very nice. In other words, everything is perfect for drunken sense gratification. They are in a flowering forest, Pushpite Vane, and they're drunk and their eyes are rolling around, and they're with all these girls who are just singing along with them, which means that the girls are into the whole thing. They're not protesting that men are singing the kinds of, songs that men sing when they're drunk and crazy, and the girls are singing along and following them. So that's undoubtedly there's a lot of this is it's like nothing's changed. You see drunk men nowadays, low class drunk men with their girls. It's hasn't changed. So this is a translation for this. H.D. Goswami said, O King Parikshit, because the two sons of Kuveran have been elevated in association with Lord Shiva, which is just the Rudras Yanachara, of which they were very much proud, they were allowed to wander in a garden attached to Kailasa Hill on the bank of the Mandakini River. Taking advantage of this, they used to drink a kind of liquor called varani, accompanied by women singing after them. They would wander in that garden of flowers, their eyes always rolling in intoxication. So Prabhupada purport. This verse mentions some of the material advantages afforded to persons associated with or devoted to Lord Shiva. Apart from Lord Shiva, if one is a devotee of any other demigod, one receives some material advantages. Foolish people, therefore, become devotees of demigods. This has been pointed out and criticized by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 7:20. Kamaistai jnana prapadyante nidevata. So kamaistai means by all these various kinds of desires. Hridayananda, people's knowledge has been stolen and they surrender to other deities. The word devata, deva of course means God, or divine being. In fact, the English word divine is related to deva or divya. And ta, that suffix ta, which you still have in Italian actually, the exact same suffix through Latin, Sanskrit, means sort of the condition or state of being something, or the position of something. So devata means, can be translated like deity or whatever, but it really means someone that sort of is in the position of being God. Someone you accept in that position, devata. So, those who are not devotees of Krishna have a taste for women, wine, and so forth, and therefore they have been described as Hridayananda, bereft of sense. This is, of course, a generalization, and as Prabhupada knew very well, there are exceptions. We know that it's not that everyone who's not a devotee of Krishna drinks liquor. And there are actually many people who are not devotees of Krishna who don't drink liquor, but or who don't run around with women. So when we read these things, it's important to realize, as Prabhupada knew himself, that these are not absolute categorical statements. And obviously, because we all know in the real world, there are people who are not devotees of Krishna, are not drunkards, or don't run around women. The Krishna consciousness, so Hridayananda, their knowledge has been taken away. The sense in which it's always true is not that they, let's say, drink or run around women. The sense in which it's always true is that they have not understood that there's ultimately one supreme God. And so, indulging in polytheism, in which one thinks there are many gods, it doesn't really matter, worship this one, that one, the other one, is a serious lack of knowledge, whatever those other habits may be. The Krishna consciousness movement can very easily point out such foolish persons, for they have been indicated in Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna says, Namam duskritina mudha prapadyante naradama maya parityana asuram bhavamashita. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, those among mankind whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender to me. Now, Prabhupada also taught that, well, let me put it this way, the question obviously arises, what is the status in this discussion of someone who is in their own way devoted to God, but may not understand that ultimately God is Krishna? And Prabhupada often showed respect for these people. So, Prabhupada is not saying that people who, let's say, believe in God or in their own way are trying to worship God are all fools because they haven't joined our movement yet. Because if we see Prabhupada's behavior with people like that, he was often very respectful and expressed appreciation for their God consciousness as far as it went. So it's important in reading these purports, which often contain strong categorical statements, that we not misunderstand them and we put them in the context of Prabhupada's many other statements and Prabhupada's personal behavior. Because we have this great advantage that Prabhupada is probably the most thoroughly documented great spiritual leader ever, just because of modern technology. I mean, people have been wondering forever what Jesus really taught because of all the problems and trying to figure out who the historical Jesus really was. There are issues. In fact, if you look at different accounts, even in the New Testament, there are different accounts. They're not wildly different, but they are different in some ways, emphasizing different aspects of his teaching. And so, for the last few centuries, there's been this effort among scholars, and faithful Christian scholars, to find out who was the historical Jesus. And they make some progress, and even significant progress, but ultimately it's difficult because the only real descriptions you have of Jesus come a few generations after he lived. So there's a problem. Ditto Lord Buddha. The first serious biography, what we would call a serious biography of Buddha was written 500 years after he lived. So you don't have really everything written down in imagine the Prabhupada Lamrita, the first biography of Prabhupada was written, 450 years from now. And no one really kept any records in the meantime. So, in the case of Prabhupada, though, we have all these books and all these films and recordings, and so Prabhupada is the most seriously documented. As far as Muhammad, of course, the Quran, but then there was the Muhammad Lamrita. And after Muhammad's gone, they spent a lot of time, and actually serious scholars trying to figure out which Muhammad said stories were authentic and which ones weren't authentic, and so on. So with Prabhupada, we have this massive documentation, which is a big advantage, and this also saves us from taking some apparently very strong categorical statements in context, and by realizing that at other times and places, Prabhupada said something very different. And so the way to actually understand Prabhupada is by having the intelligence and the maturity to put all these statements together and try to figure out what he really meant. Fortunately, we don't have to do all this when it comes to our basic philosophy, because in our basic philosophy, Prabhupada was very straightforward, just kept saying the same thing. So, but when it comes to other things, like what is the status of people who, in their own way, are devoted to God, but don't understand yet that God is Krishna. And so, there's enough, how should I put it, room for interpretation here that one can read Prabhupada's books and become a very learned, mature preacher or an immature fanatic, depending on how much or how seriously you know how to read everything Prabhupada said and see how it fits together. And as we know, some people are more attracted to the fanatical side because it gives them the extraordinary advantage of lording it over everyone else in the world. Since there are so few people in the Christian movement, therefore it's, can make you feel very good about yourself to feel you're extremely superior to about 8 billion other people. Although actually, what Krishna emphasizes in the Gita, and what the Bhagavatam emphasizes, is not being proud and actually seeing everyone as equal. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Pandita Samdarshana, the wise see everyone equally. Obviously not in every sense. I mean, we do it in emphasizing the difference between a divine life and a demonic life. They are different. At the same time, Krishna says, if you're truly wise, you will see everyone equally. For example, a mother may have two children, one misbehaved, one well-behaved, and the mother knows very well the difference, but she loves her children equally. And sees that ultimately they're both her children. So, again, if an immature person or a person with a real propensity to think that I'm better than other people reads these very strong statements, ignoring all the other things Prabhupada said, moderating these statements, then one can basically make the Hare Krishna movement look really silly. So that's why it's important that we have to approach these things maturely. So, why are the devotees of demigods greater in number than the Vaishnavas? The answer is given herein. Vaishnavas are not interested in such fourth-class pleasures as wine and women, nor does Krishna allow them such facilities. So, let's work this verse. These two verses. Read the essential again. Shri Supuvacha Rudrasyana Chadao Bhutva Sudripto Dhanadaatmajo Kailaso Vadanevanye Mandakinyam Vidokato Varuni Madiram Pitva Madad Gurni Dalochana Srijanaya Gayatris Chedatu Puspidevani. So, this raises another interesting question. We live in an age in which people claim an extraordinary amount of freedom in their personal lives, and in which there is widespread degradation. So that, for example, promiscuity, or just being sort of a woman hunter or woman man hunter, it's sort of destigmatized. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a lifestyle choice. It's like someone likes vanilla ice cream, someone likes strawberry ice cream. So someone is faithful in marriage and chaste, and someone is degraded, but those are just different lifestyle choices. That you can't morally judge them. This is, of course, nonsense. And even in the modern world, people know it's nonsense in serious matters. For example, there's when people see an airline pilot in a bar at the airport, and then they see that pilot walk to a terminal gate, go to fly a plane. Then that's criminal activity. An airline pilot who's on duty drinks, that's criminal behavior. Or, for example, if parents take a young child into a bar and the parents are drunk, that's also criminal. So, there's no question about the science of it, the fact that intoxication renders one irresponsible, incompetent, reckless. That's obvious. Or the fact that, let's say, infidelity in marriage involves breaking sacred vows, involves causing significant harm to other people, including children and the spouse. So there's no question about that. We have massive social science to confirm all this. What's interesting about modern society is that this doctrine of personal freedom has been taken to such an exaggerated extent that even causing significant harm to others is not a moral issue in the minds of many modern people. So, of course, in the case of an airline pilot, if you actually jeopardize other people, put other people in danger, it is criminal. But what about what you do to yourself? That's the idea that you can just damage yourself in any way. I mean, in a sense, that's true. In a sense, that's true. Krishna does give us the freedom to harm ourselves in any way and accept the consequences. But then again, what about the social consequences? I mean, to give a perfect example of that, take the movie industry in Hollywood, where there are endless movies glamorizing lust, adultery, sort of wanton violence, and so on and so forth. Why? Because low-class people will buy tickets to see those movies. So I found it very interesting in the recent election we just had in this country, which of course was exemplary in the intelligence of everyone concerned, voters and candidates. So without going into that and depressing everyone, what I found, one aspect of it that I found interesting is that Hollywood, known for being very liberal, supporting liberal causes and candidates, people in Hollywood were very unhappy with the election results, and yet to a significant extent, they caused the election results. Because who in Hollywood sort of taught the people that it's okay and even glamorous to be vulgar? How many thousands of movies are put out where the heroine is vulgar, unfaithful, lusty? I mean, a lot. And so having degraded the public by these movies, they then lament when a degraded public elects a degraded person. So it's interesting that again, there's all these complexities. Or, for example, the candidate who lost came out strongly in support of late-term abortion. Late-term abortion means that a child in the womb is really practically a fully developed human being. It's an infant human being. Everything's there, the face, even the feelings, feeling pain, pleasure. It's a living person. And yet, if the woman, however whimsically, just decides, no, I think I'd rather buy a new Camaro, then you can go to a clinic and doctors will murder that person. Now, if someone thinks that way, that's their. In other words, they think that individual freedom takes precedence over someone else's right to live. You can see that this suggests that people can basically do whatever they want and let people have no rights. Like if I want to kill my child because it's my body, I can do whatever. So I can do whatever I want with my body, even kill another creature. If the argument's given that the child in the womb is physiologically dependent, well, guess what? The child is still dependent on the mother for several years after it comes out. The child without the mother, for many years after it comes out, will die. So that kind of sort of narcissistic, cruel individualism is degrading. And so and it's perfectly consistent with the type of narcissism that we found in the winning candidate. So what we're really seeing is, the pot calls the kettle black. It's just that one, you get these degraded people with degraded views, fighting it out politically, and you get a voting public that is very degraded and stupid and not interested in facts. Because why? Because if you check the facts, you may forfeit the opportunity to hate other people and to come to hateful generalizations. So why forfeit that by actually looking at facts? And so the sort of the complete disregard for what is actually true or not. That if it sounds good, if it gives me the chance to hate some other group, it gives me the chance to be belligerent and nationalistic and think, for example, in America, and just kick the you-know-what of everybody else, which is militarily and historically not true. It's just this narcissism, narcissistic nationalism, disregard for others. It's something which is really shared by all the candidates. And appealing to the lower natures of the voting public. Krishna explains in the Gita that we have our higher nature and our lower nature. And advertising, for example, which like most of it does, appeals to vanity. Advertising which appeals to vanity, which appeals to lust or pride, and then you see political candidates just trying to appeal to everyone's lowest nature, and it's what they call the race to the bottom. Or as they say, the evil of two lessers. So, if we take Prabhupada's teaching seriously, then it's obvious that none of these political candidates are really the solution. So even you see devotees who should know better getting their hopes up for this or that candidate, but actually, Krishna's the solution. Prabhupada's the solution. We are the solution if we take his teaching seriously. And Prabhupada, at an advanced age, gave his life, risked his life, and ultimately gave his life, trying to help us. So what's our excuse? So if we really understand that actually only Krishna consciousness is going to save the world, not this or that politician, then we can get over our depression or our exaltation, whatever it is, and sober up and get back to business. Thinking that this or that politician is going to save the country, it's itself a type of drunken madness. Because one can become drunk on liquor or drunk on political websites. In the news, that's another type of intoxication. And what's the latest news cycle? And what's the latest thing this barbarian said? And so, why do we really care? Do these people really deserve so much of our attention? Because we're servants of Krishna. We're servants of Krishna. We are doing the most important work in the world, and we should have enough common sense, all of us, to know that Krishna is the only candidate that can actually save the world. So if the world is becoming degraded, as it certainly appears to be becoming, then rather than just curse this or that politician, why not blame ourselves because where are we? I mean, we're the MIA, the missing in action. We're the ones that are actually supposed to be saving the world, not these transparently hypocritical politicians. So, any questions on these points? Did you almost sneeze? Oh my God. Okay, that's okay. Oh, thanks for holding your nose. That's Morgan, isn't it? So, I was just joking. Morgan, I wasn't serious. So, any questions? Yes.
So Prabhupada wished that ISKCON would go down in history as having saved the world. So that would be an upliftment of the consciousness of the public, and not anything happening necessarily from the top, but rather from the bottom up.
Well, the tail wags the dog nowadays, as they say. The point is that, the public and the leaders just kind of use each other, but ultimately, if you want to get into the political dynamic, like how is power actually wielded, does it come from the bottom, does it come from the top? Both. And it just comes from both. People in general, I mean, it's the iron law of oligarchy in social science. The fact that power tends to devolve into fewer and fewer hands, because especially nowadays, government is extremely complex. It's large to the point of being obviously unwieldy and inefficient, especially national government, and most people don't have the time or ability to grasp all the intricacies and details and issues. Everything's extremely complex, whether you're talking about finances or legal matters. And therefore, in the real world, just few people have a lot of power, and those people themselves are often incompetent and ignorant. So, at the same time, when the people or the majority of the people become disturbed, demand something, then they can force politicians to follow their will. So, in the real world, one way you can avoid all the problem, the headache of actually educating yourself is just to resort to conspiracy theory, and which is a wonderful substitute for thinking. And you can speculate on who's controlling everything, when the obvious reality is the world's out of control. Or, for example, you hear people like they're 40 years behind the times, and actually the media is manipulating people. This is that would have been an interesting remark maybe 50 years ago. It might have had some truth to it. The fact nowadays is, first of all, studies show that few people believe what they read in the media. Secondly, with the digital age, information has been democratized, and actually there are thousands and thousands of independent websites where they give opinions and provide news. In fact, when there's breaking news in some part of the world that's not just New York or LA or Paris or London, where every major news network has all their people there. A lot of times the news happens in other places, sometimes remote countries, sometimes small towns, and actually the mainstream media depend on people on the ground, ordinary citizens who film it with their phone and then stream it or give eyewitness accounts. And so, because of the omnipresence of personal, individual media devices, there's been a democratization of information. And people don't believe what they read in mainstream media anyway. So, and then you get some people, even some of the saints among us, saying that, the media is just manipulating everyone. It's well, I guess ISKCON 50 means it's a chance to celebrate being 50 years behind the times. So, by the way, studies show that, we discussed this before, studies show that people who live in communities where they feel they're marginalized or not in mainstream society are much more inclined to believe conspiracy theories. So, we have to get to work, and we have to take seriously what Prabhupada is trying to do and help him do it. Any guess? Yeah?
It appears that our enthusiasm and our determination to distribute Prabhupada's teachings has waned substantially, at least in America.
I'll repeat that since we're broadcasting that it seems that our enthusiasm and determination to spread Prabhupada's teachings has waned substantially, especially in North America. Well, if it's encouraging at all, the same thing's going on in many, many countries. So there's misery in company, right? But go ahead.
So,
I'm sorry, what do they say that? Misery loves company. Misery loves company, that's the expression. So we have a lot of company now.
but in some countries, there's still some activity going on. Definitely in America, since I joined 25 years ago, the enthusiasm and the numbers of books which are going on is substantially waned. Any analysis from your part why that is happening, or why that's continuing to happen?
Oh yeah, everyone knows what I think. I think that we have to take people more seriously and they'll take us more seriously. And I think, in other words, if we take the public seriously, their needs, their preferences, within reasonable limits. We can't change our basic principles, obviously, but we can do everything else to make people comfortable with our movement, and I don't see a lot of that happening. So, and also getting books out. I think another thing is we really need to go beyond internal metrics. In other words, we can say we gave out so many books, we had so many Hridayananda, we had so many festivals. That's an internal metric because it completely ignores what the result of that was. Like how many people read the books, how many people came to the festival, what was the public reaction to Hridayananda, how many people really. It's kind of a lightning darshan. Let's say we do right now, what was the public reaction? So if we are absorbed in the notion of Agyata Sukriti, that unknown good deeds, like it doesn't really matter what the public thought, it doesn't really matter how they feel about our activities, that's irrelevant because the world will be saved unintentionally, involuntarily. The world will not participate in its own salvation, we will do everything. So this kind of hogging the ball, as we say in sports, it's a very interesting idea. The world need not participate in its own salvation because we'll do it for them by putting the Maha Mantra in their ears, by giving them books, whether they read them or not. And so it's not the real world. The real world doesn't work that way. Okay. I guess every Saturday morning they test the curves, right?
Make sure they work for Sunday.
Yeah, they should work for something. So, that's not the real world. I'm not denying there's any benefit in the Agyata Sukriti, but if you want to have a successful movement, that's not exactly the way it works. And there's, of course, a bit of arrogance built into that it really doesn't matter what non-devotees think or feel. Their feelings, their thoughts don't concern us. We know, we can control them. We can change them. We can control them again, even against their will, because we have the power to manipulate them for their own good. If that sounds a little concerning, that attitude, I think you're getting the point. That we have the power to manipulate people against their will, to make them do what we want, but of course for their benefit. So it's the it's the classic justification of benevolent tyranny. Benevolent tyranny, that we just have power over these people. We'll make them do what we want for their own good. And as far as our own feelings and thoughts, irrelevant. And this is the official strategy for saving the world, by the way. At least the Western world. Yes, Romans. Thank you. I'm going to repeat that because I've been told to repeat for the sake of the media. If Prabhupada were physically present today and saw the present state of his preaching mission, what would he say? Oh my God, I wouldn't want to be in the room because it would be heavy. So, yeah, I probably wouldn't want to be in the room. It would be so heavy what he would say. And the idea that he would say, well, you've been doing the same thing for 40 years, and the movement keeps shrinking. For 40 years, it continues to shrink. 40 years, almost half a century. So I think we won't change anything. Let's just keep doing this. I mean, anyone that thinks that Prabhupada would say that is seriously delusional. Of course, there's another response now as we see some of our most senior leaders saying, which I address in one of the papers I wrote. That is, well, maybe we don't really need to save the Western countries. Maybe they can't be saved. Maybe we just have to take Prabhupada's pranam mantra as sort of a nice try, but maybe we should be like the Amish. I mean, we're talking about some major leaders of this movement. I'm not going to mention their names because try to be a gentleman here, but we're talking about very major leaders of this movement saying that we should maybe follow the Amish, who are weird and strange and all that, but they have tight communities. Interestingly, the Amish have an official policy of not preaching. If you look up, I looked up in the database, words like preach, preacher, preaching, Prabhupada mentions these words about 10,000 times. But that's not enough for it to sink in, I guess, for some people. I mean, 10,000 maybe was just not enough. And so they're saying maybe we should be like groups who don't preach. The Amish have grown somewhat because they are very good at reproduction. So, again, as I pointed out many times, we study the life of Prabhupada, we see that each and every time that a particular strategy was not working, he changed it. And so, there's never a time in Prabhupada's life where it was kind of a hard time, not much is happening down on the farm, which is the situation for ISKCON West. There's no recorded case in Prabhupada's entire life where that was a situation for as long as our own drought here in the West. And Prabhupada just said, well, let's just do the same thing. That actually never happened. It never even, not even for half that amount of time. Not even for a third or fourth that amount of time. Not even, you could say, for 20 times less time. So, Prabhupada had tremendous agility, he was determined. It's like in football. If you know anything about American football, and I hope this is part of your regular spiritual life, watching NFL highlights. Just kidding. When they give the runner the ball, try to keep this simple. When they give the runner the ball, and there's a play, there's a set play. Okay, this on the front line, these people block to this side, these people block to that side, you open a hole, the runner runs through the hole and scores. That's the idea. But most of the time it doesn't work out exactly like that, because the defense has their own plan of how to And so what often happens in American football, which is of course baiting, just kidding. So what happens most of the time in American football is if someone's running with the ball, and even I won't go passing plays or anything, but the runner, if it's a good runner, will look at the situation in front of him and adjust. So, for example, maybe you're supposed to run to the left. He sees the left. There's nothing but these oversized defensive players just running up to smash him against the ground. And so, therefore, sometimes you see this is very common. He'll turn around and just run exactly the opposite way. The play was to run that way. That was the official play. That's what the quarterback called in the huddle. They'll turn and run the other way, and sometimes he'll score. It works. Or he'll bounce off some tacklers and then just go in, So that agility, that ability to see when a play is not working and just make something else out of it, that's the sign of a great athlete. I mean, the same thing in martial arts. In every martial arts contest, people come in with a game plan. Like, this is my strategy. We study the films of the other fighter, and we think these are his weak points or her weak points, and and then you get into the ring or the octagon or whatever it is, and you see, whoops, somehow I thought I could do this, but the other side is countering it. It's not working. And so those fighters who have agility and intelligence to adjust to the reality have a chance to win. And those who don't adjust and just stick to the same failing game plan lose. It's just the nature of the world. I mean, same thing for business plans. You go into business, you have a plan. It's not working. So just keep doing the same thing. That's the golden road to bankruptcy. And people in business who have the intelligence, the agility to see, okay, I thought this would sell. It's not selling. We need to adjust here. Those are the businesses that survive. So just kind of like this, I don't even call it. I remember when I was a kid, I used to study dinosaurs. Somehow I was attracted by very large creatures. I was a little kid, like dinosaurs and whales. I used to draw pictures of them. I can still, actually, from my early childhood, I can still draw fairly good pictures of dinosaurs and whales. But anyway, I remember that there was one, actually this is not a dinosaur, a prehistoric animal, called what was it called? The sloth, the giant sloth. The giant sloth was this very large mammal that had these huge claws, and it was a big, strong body. So if this mammal actually really wanted to fight, it was like, incredibly dangerous. But they weren't. There's one thing which surpassed their strength, and that was their stupidity. And so these giant sloths would be feeding on berries or whatever, and apparently this is what scientists say, they weren't there, but somehow they say this. And some creature would come, like a saber-toothed tiger, attack them, and they would actually keep eating them. So, being faithful can be a sign of spiritual sincerity, and continuous doing the same thing over and over again can be the sign of faithfulness and purity, or it may be the sign of stupidity, depending on the situation. So, I'm not going to call anyone names, but I just want to point that out, that there are basic principles of Krishna consciousness which we can't change, we can never change. Our basic principles that Prabhupada gave us. And there are details that Prabhupada teaches are variable. We can and should adjust them so that we remain relevant and competitive in an extremely competitive and insane metaphysical market. This may come as a shock to some devotees, but actually there are other brands out there. And some devotees feel that because of all these prophecies, there really are no competitors. That it is, there's an inevitableness about all this. And therefore, no, you don't have to try that hard. No, you don't have to make adjustments. And yes, you can stay home and just to kind of amuse yourself really, but preach because it's inevitable anyway. So this sense of the inevitability of our triumph, no matter how bad it looks on the ground, that it's still, we will inevitably win, can lead people to be mentally very lazy and physically very lazy. I remember one time I was walking with Prabhupada, a bunch of boys were walking to Prabhupada Rancho Park in Los Angeles. That was my neighborhood park when I was growing up. And so Prabhupada stopped at one point, I can still see him there, exactly where we were in the park. And Prabhupada quoted the verse in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna tells Arjuna that Maya Vaite Nihata Purvameda. I alone have already slain all these soldiers. Maya Vaite Nihata Purvameda. Nimitta Mantram Bhavasya Sachin. You just be the instrument. And Prabhupada said that this movement will succeed because it's Krishna's will. But why don't you take the credit? Why don't you take the credit? Prabhupada said, otherwise someone else will get the credit, but why don't you take the credit? And let Krishna glorify it. So the fact that the movement will succeed because it's Krishna's will doesn't mean that we cannot be fools, or we cannot really disappoint Prabhupada and not do what he wants us to do. The fact that the movement will succeed doesn't necessarily say anything good about us. And so someone may want to bask in the glory of the movement, thinking, well, the movement will succeed and I'm in the movement, so therefore somehow I'm successful. But actually, the glory goes to those who actually go out and do it. And Prabhupada said, you should volunteer, you should take the credit, not in the sense of false pride, but in the sense of pleasing Krishna, in the sense of developing an intimate relationship with Prabhupada and Krishna, because you can do puja all day and night, and if you don't really stand up and fight for Prabhupada's mission, you are not going to have an intimate relationship with Prabhupada. I mean, of course, if you're a devotee, you can please Krishna. And even if someone, let's say, is a pujari, a pujari may also be very enthusiastic to spread this movement and do whatever he or she can within their own service to do that. So it's not a question of denigrating this or that service. But when Prabhupada was here, pujaris were just as fired up as everyone else. They were just enthusiastic. Oftentimes they were the best preachers in the temple. So we're not denigrating anybody's devotional service. But if everyone in their own way doesn't really show up, especially when Prabhupada needs you, a friend in need is a friend indeed. And we cannot be fair weather friends of Prabhupada when everyone else is preaching, okay, typical group psychology, I'll do it too. But otherwise I won't do it. So, it's great we're having all these celebrations. Everyone prays, we praise ourselves, invite other people to come and praise us at different events. But in the meantime, there's reality. So that's the basic message, that we need to really revive, which from the Latin means to make live again, revivir. We need to really revive Prabhupada's spirit. That's what it means to keep Prabhupada in the center. You can't keep Prabhupada in the center just by big ceremonies and puja, offering 3,108 preparations or endless abhishekas. That by itself is not going to keep Prabhupada in the center. Or even giving speeches, that's not going to keep Prabhupada in the center. I'm not saying we shouldn't perform puja, it's just not enough. when we have the same, when we really understand how courageous Prabhupada was, how determined, how he was willing to put his own comfort aside and just do the needful, then we can talk about Prabhupada being the center of ISKCON. Yes?
His Holiness David was here a couple of months ago, 2-3 months ago. So it was Prabhupada's last days. Prabhupada was genuinely concerned. He was asking his disciples, will this movement go on? And then sometimes it's like, how will this go on? So he's constantly prodding his disciples. Then one instance says, so will this movement even go on? Then how will it go on? And one of the disciples said, Prabhupada, we just have to be sincere. Prabhupada says sincerity is not enough.
That was Giriraj, actually. Yeah, Prabhupada said that there must be intelligence. Intelligence, now, if you just think, if you're just like you just keep pushing the same button and waiting for the shoe to fall, but it never falls. It's like someone in a factory. Okay, I push the button and this comes down. It's not coming down. That's all right. Just keep pushing. It's sort of like Prabhupada himself told me jokes about people like that. People that just don't think. They don't notice what's really happening or not happening. They just keep sort of mindlessly doing the same thing. Anyway, that's the message, really. It can happen in Houston. Why not? There's plenty of good devotees, and there's lots of good devotees in Houston. And this is a beautiful temple. There are many very sincere devotees maintaining this project. This temple is not the problem. To the contrary, it's a glorious thing. And many devotees deserve a lot of credit for having arranged all this. The point is, we need another powerful program. That other powerful program is Prabhupada's primary mission. To make Americans Krishna conscious. And so, we should just do that. We should organize and get that done. It's not, again, it doesn't mean to criticize anyone else's devotional service, or we don't appreciate other achievements in Prabhupada's service. But this is what we need to do. So, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
So, in Hridayananda Maharaj ki jai.